decided today to talk about genius. What is genius? How do we connect with it? Where does it show up? How can we be a channel or a vessel for that? Hello, Zoe. Anuba Kotari joined. Interesting name. Today we're talking about genius. And like, as with so many words that we're talking about, we talk about consciousness, we talk about signal, we talk about voice, we talk about archetypes, we talk about religion and politics, and all of the words we use can mean so many things to so many people. And part of the genius, let's call it, of archetypes is that we have a precedent in our stories that helps us understand what the nature of that feels like, right? There's a story in the Christian mythos called the Tower of Babel, wherein at some point in time, human beings breach a certain level of ambition or capability, but they don't have the wisdom to match that capability. They don't have the integrated wisdom and the temperance to be able to wield their extraordinary powers. And in the story, the metaphor is they're building a tower towards heaven, and the result is the ordering principle. Let's call it God or the gods or the lightning bolt from heaven, whatever it is, intervenes, and what results is a situation wherein people can no longer speak to each other and they're all speaking from their own corners of the world, and what results is a babel. We can all recognize that, right? And in that babel, genius means different things to different people. Genius means different things to different people. And so we have to, as writers, if you're a writer or a creator here on Substack, you came here to be seen and you came here to have something to say. And we all know that there's better and worse ways of having something to say. We can generate something via AI. We can copy somebody else's stuff and pretend it's our own. And there's people out there doing that. But we're trying to do something different, right? Just make sure I haven't compromised my audio here. We really want to say something that is our own, and we want to be inspiring. And that means we want to be inspired, right? If there is such a thing as genius, which there is, and I'll hopefully persuade you of that by the end of this video, then it's something that we want to be able to invoke, channel, touch, deepen, pursue, etc. And I wrote a while ago, and I spoke to this a while ago in one of the earlier videos, we have such an unhealthy relationship with genius. Think about this for a moment. How strange is it in a society that we celebrate genius? We celebrate genius. Everybody loves Albert Einstein or Leonardo da Vinci. We recognize something extraordinary. The amount of inspiration and creativity and insight and like paradigm shifting ideas that can come through somebody or their work, even a musician or a writer. We recognize the genius and we celebrate it. And what we also do is separately, we celebrate self-awareness. It's a universally praised thing. Nobody looks at the behavior of a leader or somebody and says, oh, I love the fact that they're not self-aware. I wish they could be more unconscious and disconnected with themselves and the unfolding present moment. Self-awareness is highly prized. But as a society, we have a massive problem with people who are self-aware of their own genius. It shouldn't be like that. It shouldn't be like that. In ancient cultures, and there's lots of ways of unpacking this, I mean ancient as relatable as ancient Rome and ancient Greece. There was a norm. The ancient Greeks had the daimon, this voice of guidance and inspiration, and that would help navigate the sense of wisdom and the sense of knowing and the sense of creativity. And the Romans had this idea of a genius, this innate something special that is already there that has to be cultivated to be brought out and honored. Yeah. And that's what normal would look like. It would look like recognizing these talents in ourselves as young children, or us recognizing it in the field of young people, and I mean young of all ages, with their gifts and talents coming through. And instead of shutting them down or making them prove what lineage they are speaking from or what right they have to speak, we would be more interested in the creativity and inspiration and the uniqueness of that gift. And we would find ways to channel it and temper it and help them bring that out through their craft or their calling, right? But we don't do that. We shut people down. We'd rather put influencers on pedestals, and these are people whose only genius is garnering your attention and having no interior scruples as to how to behave, how inauthentic to behave in order to capture that attention. That is like a twisted shadow expression of what we're talking about. Everybody has a form of genius, and when that genius is allowed to shine, we all shine, right? Those participating, those lifting that person up, and that person who's allowing it to flow through them. So as writers, we all want that. We do not want to play the influencer hustle game. We don't want to learn how to do digital marketing in order to share our gifts with the world. Who have we got here? We've got Patrick, we've got Daniel, we've got Matthew Green, Robert Wilson, and Morgan. Folks, if you're here for the first time, I thrive on engagement. I like questions and challenges and engagement. If I say something that you like, let me know. Hello from London, says Matthew Green. Hello from Perth, Matthew. Today, Matthew, we're talking about genius. And assumedly, many of us are here on Substack because we want to be better writers. We want to share our callings and our craft of writing, of creativity, of analysis, of insight, of understanding, whatever that might be, through the medium of the written word, but also now, the spoken word, because Substack is allowing for that. And we're in a kind of war for the human attention at the moment. And the good side is losing. The good side is losing, the bad side is winning, and has been winning for some time. And we're only waking up to the fact that we're in the late stages of a war that's almost already lost. And we have so little of the technological capability and power that sits with algorithms which favor outrage and emotional capture and things that people say that have rhetoric and titillating value to the crowd. We were talking about ancient Greece a minute ago. The reason why the society struggled to cohere in those city-states was not because their democracy wasn't working. It was because their democracy was subverted by kind of sports fans and crowd people who could play a crowd, lawyers who could use rhetoric and sophistry to not tackle a clever point or an important idea on its merits, but to dismantle it in a way that was humorous and amusing and exciting and entertaining to the crowd. And that we call rhetoric and sophistry. And we have a version of that today. Our coherence is being subverted by a kind of performance art, right? Hey, Anna, nice to have you here. And so the only counter to that is that which is more beautiful to the soul, that which is more human, that which has more soul, right? Because all of that is like a soullessness. And genius is one of those things. Genius is one of those ideas that have been with us for so long. And I actually want to look up something while I'm talking so that we can explore that. So because of this scenario of that we can recognize through the archetypal lens, the scenario of Babel, where we ask ourselves, what is what is genius? Because genius can mean so many different things to so many different people. And I want to read something to you. It says, this is something I wrote on my other Substack called Hermetica Reiterated, under a post called the crown of creation. And Hermetica reiterated is an attempt to me to ground and reiterate an esoterica that has important maps of meaning and important context for human beings dealing with this threshold moment that we're dealing with at the moment, collectively and individually. In any event, this says, Genius can be understood as the compelling or directive intelligence, the principle inherent in a given aspect of being. We consider the genius of spirit, the genius of soul, the genius of the body. There's a genius to our bodies. There's a genius to nature. There's a genius of place. There was an idea that comes to us from ancient Rome called the genius loci, and that was the spirit of intelligence that you encounter when you go to a place, like a mountain or a river stream or a forest or even like a set of stairs. You can look at a bridge and you can see that it has a certain kind of genius in the way that it straddles straddles a gulf between two impossibly unreachable places. And it has to bring all of this brilliance and all of this ingenuity and all of this precision together in such a way that is just so to allow the passage of that enormous bridge. Think of the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco. So to go there and to look with the poet's eye is to be able to be in conversation with the genius of that place. Now, not every place has such bright and inspiring genius, but we recognize it when we see it. Each of these being the genius of spirit, the genius of soul, the genius of body, the genius of nature, the genius of place. There's many kinds of genius. Each of these is a local expression of intelligence. Local, I mean, it has a locus, right? It belongs to a person or a place or a time. Each of these is a local expression of intelligence within its respective domain, participating in the broader cosmos and the cadence of nature that shape the emergence of body and spirit and soul. So genius, therefore, is not limited to the realm of mind or to intellect only, but it is the living pattern of intelligence present wherever spirit, soul, body, nature, place, cosmos interact and express the larger whole. And I go on to talk about the genius of spirit, the genius of soul, the genius of body, and the genius of place. And there's a beautiful poem by Alexander Pope, and I'll read it to you. It says, consult the genius of the place. Consult the genius of the place in all. That tells the waters to rise or fall, or helps the ambitious hill, the heavens to scale, or scoops in circling theatres the veil, calls in the country, catches opening glades, joins willing woods, and varies shades from shades. Now breaks, now directs the intending lines, paints as you plant, and as you work, designs. And that's talking about the genius of the place by Alexander Pope. And this brings us to the question as writers and creatives here on Substack. We want to use our own voice in some way. We want to say something. We want our work to be seen. And through our work, we want to be seen. And we want to do it in such a way that isn't that perverted orgy of attention seeking and attention capture that we see out in the world. We're trying to do something more authentic, something more beautiful to the soul. And so we're wondering to ourselves, how do we communicate with that genius of the place? And how do we discover that genius inside of us? How do we give ourselves permission to transcend our conventions of permission? Who is someone to say that they recognize their own genius? How arrogant. The amount of backlash I get from people who are still trying to peddle a victim narrative, suggesting that for us to recognize genius in one person or in ourselves is to somehow imply that we're morally superior to other people. It's such a profoundly ignorant understanding of genius, right? Instead of trying to be the policeman for every man so that nobody gets wounded by a threat of a tall poppy syndrome, we could all be instead exploring our own internal forms of gift and blessing and genius and talent, of which we all have. But our modern Western life our reductionist view, our egoic, self-centered view, right? And the fact that we think everything is just as we see it on the surface, the superficial relationship that we interpret through that lens. And in that norm, there is no cultivation of genius. There is no interiority. There is no inner conversation. There's no internal discovery. So that when you come around the corner on a nature hike and you suddenly see something that's saying something to you, you don't even have language for that. You're not supposed to have language for that. You're supposed to be troubled by questions that have no right to go away. You're supposed to be, this is how we get drawn into the conversation the conversation with beauty, the conversation with life, the conversation with possibility. And that's what we're here to do. We're here to enter more deeply into that conversation and facilitate the conversation that is coming through us, through our craft and through our callings. Rippler X joined. Is this landing with folks? Because this is, to me, what's one of the most important things is how do we go about doing that? How do we go about doing that? So I was thinking yesterday, how do we enable writers and ourselves and each other to bring their gifts through? So there might be wayfinders, there might be imagineers, visionaries, there might be civic philosophers, storytellers, artists. We don't want them to ask permission from the crowd as to what's okay or what's interesting. We want them to let themselves loose and be free and tell us what they feel is most interesting without having to over-explain it. Let their genius speak to our genius. Let their eye for beauty speak to our eye for beauty and meaning. So that what? So that we can be induced deeper into the conversation. Because creatives and writers and artists have an eye for seeing the world and seeing the unfolding moment and seeing it, this impossible dichotomy between everything else that is and the self, this internal experience that we're all navigating. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to broker a conversation between that. And sometimes when you see someone's art or you read someone's writing, it scratches an itch or rings a bell inside of you that you suddenly realize, oh my gosh, here is a kindredness of soul, a kindredness of spirit, a kindredness of imagination, a kindredness of longing, a kindredness of unrequitedness or of missing a kind of beauty that's not present in the world that we all want. And it's in that kindredness that we can find common ground for more coherence, right? And more connection and more belonging. That's the idea. So I thought about this and I wanted to qualify what is genius, right? So there's let's just call it a kind of brilliance, a light that shines, either a star that's beckoning us across the horizon, some form of attractor, right? That is calling to our longing and our sense of wonder and our sense of curiosity and meaning. If you look archetypally at people who follow stars in the sky, they're always searching for meaning. They don't just want to get there. They want to get there so that. They want to find a thing so that. And it's always a so that that's connected with the welfare of people, with the welfare of community and of tribe and of belonging and of meaning. They want to get to a promised land or a way out of the problem. Something that we shouldn't look only in tight religious dogmatic frames. It's just that invitation that we can all recognize. So it's that kind of brilliance. Patrick G. Well said. Is that the Earthling? Earthling here. Hello, fellow Earthling. Channeling the Hermes archetype. Good to see you, sir. We are certainly at a threshold. It's inspiring to see so many bright and good people here on Substack. I'm not one of them, but I'm trying. We need all hands on deck for the coming storm. Yes. And in addition to that, what we're busy trying to resolve at the moment in the great Babel conversation that's happening online is whether there is or isn't actually a storm coming. So some people are saying the sky's always been falling, stop promoting doom and all the rest of it. And I understand why they would want to advocate for calm. for two reasons. One is because we don't need panic. Sure. Um, and also because many grifters are peddling that thing and then selling the cure, right? And they're not doing it for the reasons that we've been speaking about today, because they're trying to, lean towards a better, happier place for the future human. They're just doing it so that they can grow their account, so they can get listeners and followers, so they can set themselves up as some kind of a spiritual or cultural leader, because they like the attention that comes with that, not because they have a heartfelt vocation that comes with that. So I understand why people are cautionary. However, however, the doom is already here. We're not preaching doom. The trouble is here, and the fact that enough people are talking about collapse, who are talking in the archetypal context of apocalypse, right? Just the fact that enough people are talking in that context means it is something worthwhile responding to or talking to. So, what a difficult situation where every single thing that somebody is recognizing in the field as salient or worthwhile discussing, they're either talking about it in very narrow terms that tries to lead us back into their ism or their form of ideology or their form of belief or theocracy or something like that, or they're dismissing it altogether as if it's a mumbo jumbo, or they're overreacting, right? And so we're looking for this middle way, and just the understanding of that and the seeking of the middle way requires a kind of genius, right? Something deeply intelligent in us needs to reawaken again, that can hold all of this paradox, right? That can recognize the field that we're trying to navigate, and can also recognize the field of consequences that we're inviting, and how our field of possibility is being impinged, how our sovereignty is being taken away even further, right? And it's being taken to a place that's going to make it almost impossible to claw back once too much of it is lost. We need genius now. We need the brilliant ideas that are orthogonal to the way that the tech giants and the politicians and the power brokers and the economists and the elite class of this world are engineering things. We need to do things in a way that runs against and is immune to the disease of the attention capture and the influencer and that kind of character. And to me, I just look at all of that and I call it soulless. It's soulless. And soul is what is missing when life feels wrong. And therefore the opposite is the answer, is the medicine. What's the opposite to all of that? If we're dealing with overwhelm, the opposite is clarifying context. And you can only clarify context across this enormous field of complexity if you don't use more left brain reductionist analytical forms of analysis that are going to just generate more complexity and generate more argument. The other side of the brain is the mythic side, the poetic side, the mythopoetic side, the archetypal side, that can look at something and recognize the signature of a story or of a character or of an archetype or of a trope, and just through that recognition begin to make a sense of the whole. There's a guy called Michael Mead who talks about this left brain, right brain dichotomy as reductionism and imagination. And reductionism is all of our isms and our technical ways of describing things and analyzing things, but we're overwhelmed. We're sick to death of all of the commentary and analysis, and it's too much. And we're not going to get better at that by doing more of it, right? You don't wipe the filth off of you with a handful of the same filth, right? But we now have a situation online and in the world where a lot of facts are contributing and have been put together in a way that conspires to tell a big lie. We are now living in a situation, we are experiencing day by day a situation where a lot of facts and details and clinical truths and academic truths have been weaponized against us to confect an enormous illusion and a lie that we are all sick from. And the medicine for that is myth and imagination, which can pull together things which are not factually true, but which put together in a creative way that is full of soul, necessarily comes together in a way that tells us something that is profoundly and eternally true about ourselves and about life. And what we're dealing with at the moment is we're dealing with a sickness in the world where we have this ugly mirror that we're all looking into, like Narcissus, into the pond. And we're staring into this mirror, and this mirror is the internet. And we all have our own portals to this, because the nature of this mirror is like the matrix. It gives you a personal, individualized feed of what's true and what's happening in the world. And we're letting this mirror, controlled by algorithms and influencers and tech giants and people who know how to fuck with the system and people who know how to fuck with people, we're letting that tell us who we are. We're letting that tell us who we are. And of course, we are not that. We are not that. And it's taking enormous discomfort for us to wake up out of that. And different people are arriving at that awakening at different ways, through different mediums, through different invitations. And each one of us, Fractal Universe says, I definitely agree with you. I will post my paper on facts, truth, and sense making after this. Good show. And what I want to do is I want to invite everybody here, especially if you're resonating with this idea, if you feel called, right? We're trying to put together a community project whereby we're going to host talks. And we're going to host people sharing ideas. So either as keynotes or as talks or as I had another medium that I wrote down yesterday, but I can't think of it at the moment. It could even just be works of art, but we want to create a place where the people that are here recognize that distinction between what's sick out there and what better looks like, and we want to practice better together in concert so that we can get the results that we want. So today we're talking about genius and how we can develop our own, because according to me, that brilliance, that brightness is a response to our relationship with true beauty. And what do we find beautiful? We find our freedom beautiful. We find possibility and hope beautiful. We find meaning beautiful. And we find harmony beautiful. That all needs to be articulated in so many different ways. And that needs to be articulated through the voices of the writers that are here. And in order for them to say what is most beautiful, right, they have to unburden themselves of these systems of permission which say, this is how you can speak, this is how you can write, this is who you are. We have to discover again who we are, right? So that we can help through our work remember who we are, so we can help other people begin sitting with the question of who am I, and be reminded through our ways of articulating that form of beauty. And I mean archetypal beauty, which is not superficial, it's not shallow, it's all those things that we were speaking about a minute ago. If we can articulate that, we can help shape a much healthier conversation. And we all have different forms of genius. And one of the problems is letting the small, fearful, gatekeeping policeman in the crowd tell us that we're not allowed to recognize and celebrate our own forms of genius, for fearful reasons that have nothing to do with love, that have everything to do with fear and control. So at some point in time, you're going to have to get to a place of self-permission where it's not that you don't give a fuck. It's not zero fucks given about everything. It's a position where you can allocate zero fucks to that which is controlling, that which is of the nature of fear, that which is degenerative, that which is not in the service to beauty and to life. Right? You have to be able to give yourself permission, which is where you're going to clash with people on the internet. You're going to clash with opinions. You're going to clash with isms. You're going to clash with fearful people who are not ready to give themselves that form of permission, right? And the irony is there is a genius way in brokering that as well. There are better and worse ways of saying, no, I'm not playing your game. I am still learning that. And the reason I still argue with people on the internet is not because I'm trying to get dragged down deeper into the mud. I'm trying to learn how to be that lily that water lily that can grow in the mud and have its own wax seal and still aim for something beautiful above the surface, even though the roots of my experience have to live in the filth and the muck below the surface, because we only have one internet, right? We only have one Substack. And as much as I want Substack to be a lovelier place, it's still the best of a bad bunch, right? Fish cannot live in water that's too clean. Yeah, that's true. But I still have to be able to live a form of invitational leadership, even while holding my ground, even while disagreeing with someone, even while saying to them, no, I think that's a small project that you're engaged in. And I'm trying to do a bigger one here so that you can invite them deeper into the conversation. And I think that takes cultivation of genius. Arthur Schopenhauer, German philosopher, he said, talent hits a target that no one else can hit. That's what a professional writer does. The wow, look at them. They can say things in a way that's just, they can hit a target that no one else can hit. But genius can hit a target that no one else can see. Your genius, your gift to the world is the way that you solve problems, the way that you recognize patterns, the way that you can join the dots, the way that you can create a correlation between a something that happened and a something that happens for all of us, right? And so, where do we find this? We find it in inside of ourselves. PM Infinity says, "I believe that the lack of acknowledgement and integration of genius is the reason for suffering unaligned." They say, "Yeah, I sort of agree." We'll notice that there'll be 50 such statements, 100 such statements that will say, I believe that X, Y, and Z are the reason we are enduring so much suffering in the world. What we're looking for, what my personal genius is being able to say yes to that statement. It is the lack of acknowledgement and the integration of genius that is causing. But there are other ways to describe that are just as poignant and just as resonant. I'll give you another example. I believe it's our failure to have our imaginal, our soul-centric sense of self in the world as the voice, the main voice and the main identity in our minds, to which our reductionist left brain needs to be a servant and a useful servant rather than the other way around. Because having the left brain as the master, it can but only imprison that sense of soul and that sense of interconnectedness and meaning, right? Which then necessarily suffers, and the result is what we call poor mental health, right? And dysfunction at an enormous scale. We can say that is the cause of all of it. And of course, we can say 1,000 such things that we can agree, that is the cause of our malaise and sickness. But what is the sameness underneath all of those diagnoses? Because underneath that, there is something simple that explains all of it. And my version of that is soul is what is missing when life feels wrong. Soul is what is missing when life feels wrong. What is soul? In my interpretation, it's the human thirst and capacity. The human thirst and capacity for connection, for belonging, for vitality, for creativity, for imagination, by which we can get a sense of purpose. All of through which we can pursue what we call meaning, right? All of that is not catered to by an ignorance of the necessity of integrating genius and recognizing and cultivating. All of that is facilitated, that death of soul, by the modern Western world, the way that we practice healthcare, the way that we practice education, the way that we fail to initiate young people coming through into the world, into their relationship with place. Because soul is about relationship and about integration and about coherence, so that the tree can keep growing, so that it can keep blooming, so that the vine can keep growing, so that the river can keep flowing, right? Our capture by norms which are ignorant of and degenerative towards and corrosive towards soul, we can say, is that which is underneath. Yeah. Let me read some notes here. So, fractal universe says pathologies, yes. In one sense, the absence of soul is a circumstance which necessarily shapes life and relationships to life in a pathological way. By definition, physics based psychology, yes, and a relationship with physics based on psychology as well. PM Infinity says, I agree, it's a great task to handle. The assumptions behind meaning of those terms must be flushed out. We're often speaking about the same things from our own limited vantage points. Yes, so what we're speaking about today is genius and the fact that there's a necessity to awaken and connect deeply with the genius as writers here on Substack, because we have 1,000 ways to say things. And the 1,000 ways to say things is the response to that. You know, when spring comes, it's not just one bird that flies around and sings that message to all the seeds and all the trees and all of the flowers and all of the other animals. It's waves of announcement. It's waves of invitation. It's waves of beckoning. It's waves of this, and it's multiple different voices, but they sing their part of a tune of a song that sings to everything. I said to Anna, one of the ladies on here at the moment, that love is the voice that says, I will speak until I am whole. Love is the voice that says, I will speak until I am whole, and then we will all sing, and then we will all sing. So we are all the birds of announcement, both of the harshness of the winter or of the storm, but also of the rainbow and the clearing of the storm that can come later, and this headland that we might maybe trying to reach in our own sanity and in our own social coherence. It's multivalent. We need to talk about inspiration and hope. We need to talk about maturity and realism. We need to talk about what is beautiful in our old stories and our isms, why they worked. Why, when people built those bridges, did the bridges stand? And why are some people still subscribing to those paths and those bridges? We need to be able to distill what is most beautiful out of those so that we can articulate what is worth keeping, but also articulate what is worth discarding. So that when we are getting threshed by the present moment at the threshold, we are getting threshed. Why do you thresh something? You thresh something to release the kernel from the husk. The husk is what kept it safe. It was necessary. It allowed it to grow up and mature. But now that it's mature, it has to be cut down. We're in a harvest season, we can say, where everything that matured is now being cut down and weighed and threshed to get to the essence of it. And this collective experience that we're all experiencing, we can understand through that analogy of apocalypse. The veil is slipping down and we're going through a threshold and we are being threshed individually, and all of our ideas are being threshed. And all of our sticking points are being threshed so that what will emerge is the kernel of what is most essential. Our unwillingness to let go of the husk, our unwillingness to be threshed, to release that genius, to release that something special inside that is worth honoring, worth keeping, worth distilling. Yeah. We've got a million ways of explaining why, who's to blame for the threshing. We are to blame collectively as a human species for the result that we've created. No one is to blame and everyone is to blame. We're all complicit in this, right? I still shop at Amazon. I don't want to, but I don't know how to get out of that without help. And what I've come to realize is I need the help of the crowd. I need the help of community. I need the help of other sane, heart-aligned individuals that have enough self-permission to recognize their own genius so that I can let mine shine and let mine do the work as a civic philosopher or as a teacher or whatever it is that I'm bringing to the party, so that everyone can realize we've all got things to bring to this party, so that we can make the whole journey more palatable, more human, more meaningful, more sane. And this is what I want. This is always what I've wanted, right? And it means you need to find your forms of genius. And there's ways to do this. There are ways to do this. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my commitment that I want to keep these shorter because I tend to prattle on forever because I catch fire. Fractal Universe says narrative and ego reality buffer for most. Maybe explain to us what you mean, narrative and ego. Yeah, it's like Plato's cave. We hold on to the narrative and the story that edifies our identity. And when we have such an egoic sense of identity, when we're not connected with place and to the right brain or the soulful or the mythic context of why we're here, right? We can't connect with meaning, and therefore we have to dive very, very deeply into a reality buffer that spares us from the enormity of that sense of aloneness and abandonment. We're all built from the same stars, exactly. All right, ladies and gentlemen, if you like that and you want to explore genius more, just keep following, tick little love hearts on the work, ask questions, say comments, just let other humans know that humans valued this. Thanks for the game. It's appreciated. Yeah, for sure. And the game is afoot. The game is afoot. Let's play the game. I'm suggesting one of the fruits of my genius is this understanding that if we can just reframe our collective project as a game like jiu-jitsu, a game like agile project development, where there doesn't need to be a right or a wrong, but we can recognize better and worse ways, and we can establish protocols that keep the game healthy without having to resort to rules or thou shalts. And the invitation to the game is for people to arrive with their own sovereignty intact, or to at least value their own sovereignty, that they're committed to building it, so that they don't have to invest all their energy in checking that everybody's using the right language or who's trying to compromise who. It's not the main project. The main project is developing our own authenticity, developing our own agency, developing our own voice, developing our own forms of genius, whilst recognizing and appreciating and honoring that in other people, without fear that somebody's going to get more pie than you. You know, genius is not pie. Inspiration is not pie. If one person, hey Morgan, if one person shares something that's inspirational, it doesn't take away from the vase or the bowl of or the urn of what's inspirational. it is it's not a finitude, right? It's an infinitude. And as soon as we realize that that is the true source of anything that we want to call abundance, right, we'll stop being so covetous about stupid things like funnels and funnel bros and um, building business pipelines and trying to build our Substack brand so that we can soapbox our thing. There has to, underneath that, be this like common thread of convergence and coherence and coming together. That's what humans do. They come together. They come together. They don't all try and build their own individual electronic platform. That the whole project of that is something insane. You have to straddle the paradox of that. We have to say, yes, this is where I'm speaking my way, but I still want to do that in the context of a community. Imagine we all had to build our own communities. There's something mental about that. There's something mental about that. That doesn't mean inside a collective society, there can't be communities of interest or communities of practice. You want that, but you don't want that to be the only form of interoperability between people. You want that to be a interoperability between a niche group of people who are served by that meal, but we still all need to be all part of the same vine. Civilization built around coherence and cooperation. Yes, and I've spoken about stable mutual actualization before. Yeah, not extraction. Not extraction. That's it. Okay, folks, I don't want to talk too long. I tend to make these things way too long, and I think they, as entertaining as they are, they're detracting for other folks that come along and want to take part in the conversation and hear what we have to say about genius. So I'm not even sure that I answered the questions on genius. What does one do? I think what we landed on here today collectively is why it's important to be able to recognize it in ourselves and other people, and what gets in the way of that. And yeah, we can maybe deepen that conversation another time. The reason I'm speaking about this is because I have an eye on the field. I see what signal is coming up in the field, and the signal that's coming up at the moment is about creativity. It's about creative expression, creative exploration as a response to what we perceive as like a degenerative spirit, and degenerative actors that are by definition against the project of life. And a response to that has to be its opposite. Anyway, have a beautiful evening, folks, and thanks for joining me. And I hope to see you again next time in a couple of days. Take care.